Hey, how's it going? It is your muscle building coach, Lee Hayward, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Total Fitness Bodybuilding Podcast. Now, in today's episode, you're actually going to be getting an interview that I did with another fitness coach, Tom Mouland. And Tom has a podcast dedicated to helping folks in their 40s achieve sustainable, lasting fitness and fat loss transformations. And it really parallels with a lot of the stuff that we cover within our Muscle After 40 Blueprint program. So we decided to do a podcast together. And after we did it, I thought it went so well. I said, hey, Tom, would you be okay if I shared this on my podcast as well? And he said, absolutely, go ahead. So what you're getting here now is the podcast that I did with Tom, where we're going to be discussing some of our best tips, tactics, and strategies on how you can lose the gut, build lean muscle, and achieve sustainable fitness in your 40s and beyond. So without further ado, let's jump into the podcast.
All right, I think we're live. So we are just going live here. Lee, thanks for hopping on. We're going to wait for some people to come in, buddy, and then we're going to kind of do a little bit of an intro and talk about fitness over 40.
Yeah. Excited to be here, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was really excited to have you on the cast as well, because obviously like the Tom the Trainer's Fitness Over 40 is the name of the podcast, and we're both helping people who need to do things a little bit different. And I am really interested in hearing some of the beliefs that you have, because we haven't really had any of a chat leading up to this. And it's a matter of, let's just see maybe how similar or how different we may be. But I have an assumption we're probably going to be somewhat similar, right? So
probably more similarities than differences for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just going to do an introduction to the podcast, and we can maybe even really just kind of skip all the formalities. Obviously, welcome back to the Tom the Trainer Fitness Podcast. Chatting with Lee Hayward. Lee and I are connected through a group of coaches in the online space. He is a really great coach. He's a former bodybuilding competitor, specializes in, as I implied earlier, helping people over 40. And we're going to get in, we're going to kick it, we're going to see where the conversation goes, but we're going to try to maybe talk a little bit about like sustainable nutrition, but we'll see where things go. So Lee, could you say, hey, what's up? Say hi to everybody and introduce yourself, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, and thanks again for having me on board with the podcast. I'm excited to be here. And just to kind of give your listeners a little overview of who I am, I've been around the fitness space for quite a while. Like I literally started my very first website back in 1997. So right when the internet was getting launched as we know it, that's when I started online. And my whole online journey came about because I was a former competitive bodybuilder. Like I started competing in bodybuilding at the age of 17. And right on up through my senior year in high school, I did my first show. Right on through my teens and 20s into my early 30s, I was competing in bodybuilding. And my whole, I guess what I was coaching and teaching online at the time was up and coming bodybuilders. So I was kind of modeling what I was doing. I was competing for multiple years, like say literally from 95 right on up until 2011. And at that stage, I was kind of getting a bit burnt out from bodybuilding, realized I'm not going to go pro. I don't have the genetics to go pro. And I don't even want to do what pros do in terms of bodybuilding, because you got to realize, like back in the day, it was very naive. It's not as open and transparent as far as, you know, what people are taking and doing in terms of the sport of bodybuilding. It was, when I started off, I literally thought I was going to win the Mr. Olympia, and I was going to do it naturally, by gosh. Right? You know, I was that naive. And then as I got into the sport and realized what was involved and realized that I didn't have what it took, I started to lose the fire for bodybuilding, but I still kept active, still worked out. But without that drive, you know, the nutrition wasn't as strict. There wasn't that, you know, that goal there. And even though I was still active, I slowly started to put on a few extra pounds. I just had a prolonged off season, if you will, and started to gain a bit of extra weight. And then the big turning point for me was 2016. My wife, she gave birth to our son, Harvey, and I became a father. And I was knocking on the door of 40, new father, all the added responsibilities. And I finally realized what people were talking about when they say, you know, hey, I'm busy. I have kids. I got a family. I got responsibilities. It's not as easy. And that's what really made me had to rethink and reevaluate, like, how do you make this work as a guy over 40, new father, family responsibilities? Like, how do you juggle all that and still get in shape? And that's where the whole Muscle After 40 blueprint came about, because this was something that I was on my own personal journey. And once I cracked the code, so to speak, and figured out how to get myself in shape, I said, you know what, I got to share this with others. So then that's where I really transitioned into helping guys over 40 in order to lose the gut, build muscle, and improve their health, and to do things, do what they want to do, live life to the fullest without having your body holding you back. So that's what I really focus on now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm just curious though, like, what are these things that bodybuilders are doing that you're talking about? I don't, I believe the same thing, man. When I was just like, and nowadays you're like, oh, okay. All right. Well,
it's so transparent. And, when it comes to the performance enhancements, and back in the day, it was simple stuff, just hormones like testosterone and various, compounds. And now we have peptides and SERMs and God knows what people are putting into their bodies. And it's just, that scares the crap out of me. It really does.
Yeah, and it's kind of become like extreme, right? Like I know of bodybuilders who are just not even like pro bodybuilders, but like bodybuilder competitors, and like with the transparency based the way social media is right now, I've seen things where they're posting about like what they're taking, and I'm thinking to myself, like, I think I could coach a guy on TRT to look better than you do with all that crap on you, and just do a decent diet, and you're spending how much a month on all this stuff, and the only thing that I see growing is your nose and your ears from all the growth hormone that you're taking, and the rest of you looks like it's the same size. So but we're in a world where extremes are extremes, right? So, what are some of the things, like, I think really what I'm hearing and what you kind of mentioned before we chatted a little bit is just like the importance of the sustainability of it all.
Mm-hmm.
I still do a little bit of like, depending, like right now I've just rebounded off of a really big bulk. I got to 185, 183 ish for a photo shoot. And I rebounded and I started growing like I'd never grown after a photo shoot and a rebound before. And I went, okay, I'm just going to pour gas on this, because originally the goal was to just kind of sustain and stay pretty lean. Well, then I started growing the way I was, and it was like, oh, never mind, goals changed. But for the most part, in my years of my 40s, it's kind of been like all about sustainability and like little tiny micro gains here and there. Before 40, I was a bit more aggressive, but whatever, to each their own as to what they want to do. But I think like a lot of guys our age, it's like we can't be completely consumed by it. You and I are fortunate enough that like this is what we do for a living, so we can probably put more into it than the average person of which we help. But what are some of the things that you've kind of been focusing on with your clients who are over 40 to find a success and then sustainable success?
Yeah, and that's something, it really depends on the individual. Where are they at in their fitness journey? If someone's just getting started, I want to really focus on, let's just keep it simple, focus on building in those solid habits. But as somebody gets more advanced, they may actually want to pursue bodybuilding, as just like a bucket list goal. And it's ironic we're talking about this now, because I have 2 coaching students right now. One guy is in his 60s and another one is in his 70s, and they're both getting ready for a bodybuilding show right now, which is so cool. And they both competed before. So they did a show last year. Now they're going to be doing their second show this year. So the goal is to improve upon their conditioning and from the year before. The reason I want to bring that up is because I'm not anti bodybuilding or anti, I guess, hardcore training and nutrition, but you got to realize the limitations to that. It has its time and its place. And I want to just kind of back up and share my personal experience of when I was getting ready for bodybuilding competitions. This is how it always went for me: is find out a show, maybe I'll say there's a show coming up in 16 weeks. And I say, okay, I'm going to put on the blinders. I'm going to focus, I'll put all my eggs in that basket. I'm going to just go 100% into that show. So there was no cheat meals. It was like boiled chicken and broccoli, the hardcore cutting diets. It was 6 days a week in the gym, 2 hours of cardio, just burn the candle at both ends. And I mean, it worked. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it worked. I got in incredible shape, got contest shredded. And from the outside eye, I mean, you're looking at that before and after transformation during that whole contest prep. It's like, whoa, that's dramatic. That's when you see the big, before and after is when everybody's like jaw dropping. But the problem with that is, as soon as the contest was over, right, it's like, okay, where's the all-you-can-eat buffet? Where's the ice cream shop? Where's the pizza place? Where's the bakery? Right? Like, where's all that crap that I've been craving in the last 16 weeks dieting for this show? And then I go out and I just start eating that stuff. And it's literally built into bodybuilding competitions, because usually most shows, they end at an after party, maybe at a pizza place or some restaurant where everyone's going to drink and eat and celebrate. And it's just, it causes everything to on spiral. I mean, like, the next thing you know, you start eating that stuff and it's so hard to turn it off again. And it took months of dieting to get in shape, only a few weeks of falling off the track to gain it all back. And then here I be a few weeks after the show, abs totally smoothed over, like puffy and bloated, and then trying to tell everybody, well, I'm bulking up now because it's, I want to get bigger for next year's competition. And that was something that really irked me, but I always knew in the back of my mind, okay, well, I am going to diet down for next year's competition. And that's what kept me on track, because I was getting ready for the, our provincial championships every year that we had. And I would diet down for that. But then it was always like, get shredded, balloon back up, get shredded, balloon back up. And there was never any sustainability. That was something that really irked me. And because it was the extreme all or nothing approach, right? And nowadays, I try to, let's not focus on this extreme approach. Let's focus on mastering being good enough and good enough consistently. Or another way of saying it, going to be consistently good versus occasionally great. And I find that's a tendency in bodybuilding, is this all or nothing, right? If I can't be perfect, then screw it. What's the point of doing anything at all? And let go of that mentality. And it's one thing to say it, like we're talking about it here now, but it's another thing to actually put that into practice, because when you're in that moment, it's so easy to fall into that all or nothing trap.
Well, it's funny. I mean, I kind of sort of ish did it. Like, I bulked up this most bulk extreme, man. I put on 50 pounds nearly.
That's crazy.
Now, having said that, I put on 9 pounds in 24 hours just through carb loading after my most recent photo shoot. And I actually looked at my photos and was like, shit, I should have gone to the photo shoot like that. I looked way better with all those carbs in me, but everything's trial and error and test. And I coached myself through it. Like, to me, I was just growing like crazy with this one, though. Like, I didn't feel like I was being like gluttonous per se. It did get to a point though where it was like, okay, my workouts suck, my sleep sucks. I feel like I'm breathing heavy doing a bicep curl because I literally have so much food in my stomach to feed myself to keep blowing up like this and growing like this, that like it's just becoming uncomfortable. I feel like I put on a considerable, like the most amount of size I've ever put on doing that. And it was intentional. But then there's also been times where it's been unintentional and just like that uncontrolled all or nothing. Like, I would say this was a controlled, I'm all in on this because the way the results were coming. But like, then there's also been that whole like uncontrolled, like the first photo shoot I ever did. I'm separated now. My ex-wife is my ex-wife, not my wife. Anyways, I did a photo shoot, and I remember looking over at her watching me while I'm doing the photo shoot at my leanest, my first photo shoot prep ever. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, I don't think she's ever looked at me like that before. Like, she's looking at me like I'm a piece of meat. This is awesome. Like, I'm gonna get me some tonight, right? And we went to the restaurant and ran into some friends after the photo shoot prep, and they had appetizers, man. And I just started going and going and going, filled myself to the point that by the time we got home, I was like, oh my God, I was so full that I was like, will you help me take my socks off? Like, I literally just felt like I was gonna burst. I'm like, will you help me take my socks off? And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, like, you pig, like, she was looking at you like you were a piece of meat and you were going to get some, and like, you're going to need a rain check on that, because like, if she touches you, you're going to fart or explode somehow. So I've been there for sure. I've never shared that story before, but when you started talking about where the wheels come off, I'm like, oh yeah, it cost me too.
That's the way it is. Like, you can rebound so quickly, and unless you've actually experienced it, you can't appreciate it. I mean, I've seen guys literally put on 20 plus pounds, in the matter of 24, 48 hours. And like, I've seen guys literally over the course of a week post contest put on over 30 pounds. And you know, they're just so like their ankles swell up and everything. It's just like this crazy rebound.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's certainly not healthy. But within that context, there is a fine line where you can make some really good gains after a cut for lean mass, because your body is so, like, insulin sensitivity is at its peak. Your body is so receptive to soaking up those, all that extra glycogen and nutrients, and you can utilize that to volumize the cells and really catapult your gains. But there's that fine line with it where some is good, more is not better, when it comes to that rebound.
I think like sometimes people will use that rebound as an excuse of like, I'm bulking. And it's like, well, you're not bulking. Like, you're kind of just, pardon my French, you're kind of just eating like an asshole is kind of like what you're doing. And you're just using bulking as an excuse for it. But I've been there. Like, I've been, the first time I bulked up to over 200 pounds, I had swollen ankles, like, and my sleep was horrible. And I put on a significant amount of muscle doing that. I would argue I put on over 20 pounds of muscle in a year. If I were to look at where I was in like 145s in the 170s and the time I took where I bulked up to over 200 pounds and then kind of came back down to it. And I would argue I put on quite a bit now. Like, I feel as though I'm of the same body fat percentage as I was when I was around 200, and I'm 218 today if I were to compare photos. But this one was very intentional. And I think people can just get like lost in that. And again, like they use that just, oh, I'm bulking. It's like, well, like a good successful bulk is like just a lot more of the food that you were eating to get lean, and probably getting your carbs as high as you can kind of get them until you're like, oh my God, I can't take it anymore. And then upping fats to leverage more calories once you get your carbs to about as high as you can take them. Because at some point, if you're really aggressively bulking, like I was at a point where I was like, I don't even want to drink my coffee after breakfast. I don't have any room in my stomach.
That's overkill. Yeah.
Yeah. But, and I think it was really successful, like based upon my appearance and where I'm at. Then there's the people who bulk and they're just eating all the crap.
Yeah.
The calorically dense crap, the, deficient foods and processed foods. And it's like, well, that's not bulking. Like, that's just like giving up on dieting and a healthy lifestyle. I was eating upwards of 4,000 to 5,000 calories of eggs, sprouted grain bread, oats, peanut butter, protein powders, chicken burgers, and, at one point, like English muffins and jam and stuff in and around my workouts, and then more peanut butter and like stuff like that. It wasn't like, well, I'm going to go to Wendy's and Arby's and yada, 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 and call it bulking. It's like, that's not growing muscle. You're not growing muscle doing that, right?
Oh, I can totally relate to that, because I was eating like an asshole, as you said. I mean, after those shows, because again, you were so deprived, like months on end, not a cheat meal and stuff. And it's just like, as soon as you open up those floodgates, it's so hard to control it. And nowadays, like when I'm working with people, or even for myself, if we want to focus on gaining mass, it's just like you said, it's still the same dieting foods. Like, you're still eating clean, your lean proteins, your complex carbs, your veggies, your healthy fats. It's not, as you mentioned, the fast food and pizza and burgers and fries and stuff. It's just you're eating the same stuff, but you're eating more, so you're no longer in a deficit, but you're in a slight surplus. That's it, right? Like, a lot of people think there's a bulking diet and a cutting diet, and well, there is, but it's just adjusting portions. Are you in a deficit or are you in a surplus? And it's a very fine line. The way I actually like to focus on this is, if somebody wants to maximize muscle gains, is let's just make sure that you're not in a deficit and you have enough so that you can actually fuel those workouts, get through them feeling strong and energized, without having to go to the extreme of force feeding yourself. I mean, there is a time and a place for that, like especially if someone has a really fast metabolism or someone who's younger. When I was a teenager competing in bodybuilding, like, my late teens, early 20s, I had to actually purposely eat some junk food to make gains, because this was back in the days reading all the muscle magazines and reading about the chicken and rice and broccoli diets. And I literally tried to do that year round when I started off. And like, I couldn't make any gains, as a teenager eating chicken, rice, and broccoli. There's not enough chicken, rice, and broccoli you can stuff in to actually grow from. And then I remember hearing from some advanced bodybuilders saying, hey, maybe you should eat a bit more fatty foods, like have a burger, have a few fries, have a slice of pizza every now and then. And I started to do that. And then all of a sudden I started to grow. But that's a very specific situation, when you're in that prime of your life, everything's metabolism's on jacked up, in your late early 20s. But as you get into your 40s, you can't do that anymore because you start eating those burgers and fries and pizza, and you'll gain weight all right, but it's not in the biceps, it's in the belly.
For sure.
That's one of the changes I've noticed, like from going through the journey for such a long time. Like I can appreciate when you're listening to young people talk about training and nutrition, what works for someone younger is not necessarily going to work for someone in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. Right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that goes with everything that we do, and it's just not nutrition. I take a lot of heat at times on my social media because I'll very much use the language of stop doing this in your 40s, or back in my 20s, I used to do this. And now that I'm in my 40s, and I'll take a lot of heat from usually young kids and stuff or whatever, or people who are not in their 40s yet being like, how you grow muscle is how you grow muscle and how you put tension on and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, like lift up heavy shit for 25 years and then tell me it's the same, because the weight that I squatted at 19 years old has nowhere near the effect on my central nervous system at the weight I can squat today. And the weight that I can bicep curl at 19 years old while I was still building my physique has nowhere near the shear forces and the strain that it puts on my elbows if I were to lift hard and heavy now. You know what I mean? Like it's all different. It's all different. And anybody who says that it's not either hasn't been doing this for very long. They're just too young to know the difference because they haven't beaten themselves up yet. Like my elbows get hot if I do certain exercises or work in certain rep ranges. I got to switch it up or my elbows are going to be pissed. And if my elbows are pissed, guess what? I'm not lifting to my, you know what I mean? I'm not getting the most ideal outcome out of my workouts, right?
You're not going to be able to be consistent either, right? You'll be laid up with tendonitis or aches and pains, and consistency is more important than intensity as you get older.
Yeah, there's no reason too why you can't necessarily say, for example, like while I was on my most recent bulk, I do a lot of like controlled mind muscle connection. I pick exercises that I know align with my anatomy well, so I don't put excessive strain on joints or excessive strain on my central nervous system. I don't squat anymore big weight. I don't deadlift big weight anymore. I still can, but I don't because it tanks me into my recovery. The most I often curl, if I curl 30s, I'm feeling aggressive that day. But then I can go a period of time where I haven't touched anything over 30s in a while, and I can go over there to test myself and grab the barbell curl, the easy curl bar, and be like, oh, I'm easy curl barring with control and mind muscle connection, like 80 pounds, 90 pounds for reps of 8 and 9 and 10. 2 years ago, I wouldn't come anywhere near that, but I didn't need to touch that weight and and beat myself up to be able to progress. And I'm clearly have more muscle. I'm clearly stronger, but I didn't force feed my elbows heavy weight to get there.
Yeah, that's certainly something that you have to pay attention to the individual. And I always find as people get older, you have to respect the body more and really pay attention to individual mobility. Like some people can squat comfortably, right? Some people can't. And it's not always, hey, you're using bad form. I mean, that could be part of the reason, but it's just your genetics and your mobility, your leverages. I still do some in-person training, and one of my in-person coaching students that I'm working with now, he's only started working out in his mid-30s. So like he's 35 now, and he's only in his second year of lifting. But he can do full squats and exercises. I'm like, man, like that's impressive, like your mobility and stuff. And like, how the hell do you do that? And then I come to realize he had a skateboarding background when he was younger. So I'm thinking like all that mobility you had from skateboarding and popping ollies and jumping and all that kind of stuff, like that carried over. Like he still has that mobility in his ankles and his hips and stuff. So like he can sink a full squat, no problem. Whereas some other guys, it ain't happening. Like a full squat is just not in their genetics. So they cannot do it. They just lock up, right? Even if you coach the technique. So, you got to adjust that for everybody, right?
Yeah. Or sometimes like they can do it, but we would have to do so much mobility work on that individual to be able to get to do them to do it well. Working with people in their 40s and beyond is like they don't have the time to do that anymore. So you got to be intentional about your exercise selections with them, or know maybe secrets and hacks in order to get them to do it well. I'm still a believer that like I really like my clients to learn the barbell lifts really, really well in the beginning stages, before we start to kind of get away from the style that they start with and get into more of a bodybuilding style over time. But at the same time, it's like, well, I need you to put plates or wedges under your heels, and that it's just really dependent on the individual, like you say. Some people are just like jacked up, and you would have to spend 30-40 minutes a day on mobility to get them to be able to do the movements really well. And then at that point in time, it's like, well, they didn't come to me to lay around on the floor for 40 minutes.
One of the things I always like to focus on too is I focus on working the muscle and training the body, not getting hung up on the specific exercise. If someone can't squat or can't bench press, like maybe they got some shoulder issues or mobility issues, and it's just, we try it and it's like beating a dead horse, it just doesn't work. Hey, let's do a chest press instead of a bench press, or let's do a pendulum squat machine instead of a barbell squat, or let's just work the muscle and not get hung up over the exercise. And for most people, that's perfectly fine, because unless you're a competitive power lifter where you have the squat and bench and deadlift, the average person who wants to get in shape and look and feel healthy, they don't have to do these exercises. They just have to work the muscle. So I mean, that's the cool thing about being aware and being open-minded to that, where you can adjust the approach based on where you're at, and not having to have that narrow-minded, like, oh, you got to squat. Squats are the king of exercises. Like, if that doesn't work for you and your body, we don't need to freak out and obsess over it. We can do something else instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you made a good point there. Like, so I have a really thorough onboarding process with my clients that, like, before they even start a program, they actually go through a week-long onboarding process, part of which is like movement refinery and skill-based things, right? Like, as far as like skill acquisition things, it's like, I'm going to teach you everything that you need to know before you start the program so you can be successful on the program and not feel as though I'm literally throwing you in the deep end of a pool with no life jacket and being like, swim. So I kind of like to prepare them, and part of which is looking at their movements. But also towards the end of their onboarding, they get a training from me that talks about like, here's how you make smart exercise selections or substitutions based upon what's on your program, the thought process behind of which I take, which in my opinion, I feel is a little bit unique in the way I select exercises. Now you understand what I'm thinking of when I pick that exercise, for example, i.e. a Smith machine bench press. I'm looking for a high amount of stability in that exercise externally, and I'm doing a bench press, a pressing category of exercise. Well, there's no reason why you can't go over to the hammer strength machine over there, because it's the same exercise with the same category of stability, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's huge, because I think like it is very, very hard to write a program that suits every individual to their anatomy. And I think something that we need to do as coaches is like make our clients understand them at that and educate them on like, here's how you make substitutions. The concept of this program here is going to get you fit. It's going to get you ripped, and it's sustainable and all those things. But you need to use a little bit of intuitive selection sometimes to be like, I need to swap this exercise for this exercise, but I understand the thought process behind the concept of the program there, right? So I think you made a good point there.
Yeah. And even being open-minded from a practical point of view too, because sometimes we go to the gym and, hey, the machine that you want to use is being occupied. And if you don't want to sit around and wait, are you comfortable enough to switch up a substitute exercise that will get the same effect, right? And know how to program that in and still progressing forward, because obviously different movements are going to feel different, different weights and everything else. But that's another thing I like to do with my coaching students is teach them how to be flexible with their workouts so that they're not frustrated when training at a busy gym and like, oh shit, I'm supposed to do this, I'm supposed to do a press in this machine and this is busy. What can I do instead? Well, hey, we can do something else.
Yeah, for sure. I have different versions of each program. So I have two versions of every program that I have. One would be what I would call like a home-based version that you can still use at the gym.
Sure.
But like the home-based version gives them like literally all kinds of substitutions listed in the instructions. Or also works really, really well for a client who's like, man, I go to the gym at 5 o'clock and like 6 o'clock at night. And it's like, yeah, you're not supersetting anything that's a piece of equipment, dude. Like we need a dumbbell-based version for you, i.e. the home-based version that will say something like barbell bench press. If you can't do a barbell bench press, do this exercise. I don't know, barbell squat. If you can't do a barbell squat, then do walking reverse lunges in the instructions and stuff. Because some of the people that I work with, I just did an interview with my accountant today. He runs Govro Accounting, which is a pretty big firm in Canada or whatever. And he talked about it because he's like, as high performers, there's times we can just suffer from like decision fatigue. And so for some clients, they've just got it. And it's like, you know what, you don't even have to think about what decision you need to make to substitute the exercise. It's just in the instructions. If you can't do it, pick that other one up there. But it depends on the individual, right?
But that is a real thing. I mean, decision fatigue, as you mentioned there. Yeah. And I think that's where having a coach and someone who you can bounce ideas and get that, third person perspective makes all the difference. Because a lot of people say, well, I'll try and figure it out on my own. And, if you're going through a lot of stress in life and work and family, there's only so many good decisions you can make before you hit that decision fatigue.
Right.
You may intellectually know what to do, but are you actually doing it when it counts, putting things into action?
In your training, I'm just kind of wondering, like for me, what I found quite often is like less is more now. Even up into my late 30s, I would train 5-6 days per week. And now I really find the sweet spot on 4 days per week. I will have a client train 6 days per week, or I will train 6 days per week if time permits that I can. But if I do that, now my workouts are 35, 40 minutes, not 60 minutes or 55 minutes, right? I believe that there's this sweet spot, and maybe it's for all lifters, but I definitely have found it to be true as I've gotten over 40 to be like in and around 4.5 hours of training per week of actually dedicated resistance training is probably all you really need to do. Because if you're doing more than that, you're probably half-assing it. And if you're doing more than that, you're getting into junk volume. And if you're doing more than that, you're probably actually getting into creating a recovery fatigue for yourself. What are your thoughts on that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's a great point you brought up there. And when it comes to training, one thing I always like to emphasize is when you're in the gym training, that you're not actually building muscle. Like that is the stimulus and you're breaking the body down. You have to go through the whole rest and recovery and then super compensation phase afterwards. So like I actually did this in a podcast of mine just recently. We went into detail about this. But if you look at like you go into the gym, you're at baseline. After that workout, like you've dug yourself into a rut. Like you're beat up, you're weaker than when you went in there. Now you have to let all that recovery process take place. And then once the body recovers, then there's a short period of time where you get that super compensation. That's ideally when you want to do that next workout, when you're in that super compensated phase. So it's almost like take 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward. And you keep repeating that. If you try and train too soon, you're just digging yourself into a rut. Either you're going to be plateaued where you're not making any progress, or sometimes you actually even get weaker. And we see this. I mean, I've experienced that in my younger days. I think that more is better, and you're training 6 days a week, 2-3 hours a day, going hardcore and thinking, oh, I'm going to force myself to grow. And it's like, I'm not seeing the gains. I'm not seeing the gains. Like, what's on the go here? And then literally sometimes scaling back the volume, scaling back sometimes even the intensity can actually lead to better gains, right? So it's literally training smarter, not harder. And that's huge. And I find as you get older, the more that comes into play. So a general rule of thumb I recommend for a lot of my coaching students is every other day workouts. So work out one day, take the next day off. Work out one day, take the next day off. And for most people, that works really well. And then if they want to do more on top of that, then we can incorporate some low intensity cardio on those rest days. whether it's just getting outside for a walk or a bicycle ride or doing some form of cardio at the gym. If someone's really wants to be at the gym, hey, yeah, you can go to the gym, but you're going to do some low intensity cardio. You're not going to be in there hammering, weight training day after day after day, because your body can't take it. And not only the muscles and I guess the central nervous system, but it's the joints too, right? Like the joints need more time to recover, especially as you get older. And I found this, like if I try and push it, say training 5-6 days a week, yeah, you might get away with it for a few weeks, but then all of a sudden, like, man, my shoulders are bothering me. My knees are killing me, right? The hips, and gee, it just doesn't feel good. So having that recovery time in between those sessions, not only going to allow the muscles to recover, but the joints, tendons, and ligaments as well. I mean, maybe you can relate to this, Tom, but I mean, when I was younger, I abused my body. Like I just went in there hardcore, like go heavy, go home, or, like no pain, no gain. And had that mindset, like don't be a pussy, go hard. And it worked. I mean, it worked when you're younger, right? Now, I thought I was invincible until I had my first serious injury. And that happened when I was 28. I tore a muscle in my back doing squats. And up until then, I never had a serious injury, right? So I thought I was invincible. Sure, you might pull something or strain something, but it was nothing major, take a week off and you're back to normal again. But that first muscle tear, that took over a year to get back to normal training again. And even then, I mean, I'm still not, like, that still haunts me today, right? Like I squat or deadlift the same as I did before that muscle tear. Learned the lesson the hard way, unfortunately.
Yeah, I can relate to it. I don't think I really figured out lifting well until I was became a PT and I was like in my 30s or whatever. And then obviously like the progress that I made at that stage was just like really phenomenal. I think I wasted a lot of years going off of the magazines and you just like there was one thing for sure is in this day and age, there's a lot more information for people to be successful with fitness. I think people still spin their wheels unnecessarily without looking to hire help and things like that. But I kind of did that in my 30s. It's like I started finally getting these phenomenal results in my 30s. And I can remember, man, like building up patellar tendonitis and just being like, yeah, my knee is really starting to bug me. I better order some powerlifting knee sleeves and keep training. And then it's like you get to the physiotherapist and he's just like, so what's going on? It's like, well, my knee started hurting about like 8 weeks ago or so. And so what I did was I just kept going. And then it hurt really bad to the point where I bought some knee sleeves. And then that was like manageable for me. And I kept going. And now it doesn't matter what I do. I can't even walk up the stairs without my knee hurting. And it's like, how many days a week are you training? 6. And oh yeah. And you're squatting and you're deadlifting how many times per week? Both of them twice per week with 300 plus pounds every single time. Oh, okay. Yeah, you need some time off.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a meathead. Like, I should have just walked in with like a sticky note on my forehead that said bona fide meathead, no days off. We've all done it though, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I grew up, reading Arnold's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, and working out twice a day, 3-hour workouts and stuff. And it's like, hey, I thought I was being a slacker because I was only doing 1 workout a day, 6 days a week. And Arnold was doing 2 a day, 6 days a week, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, it's so easy to get caught up in that more is better mentality. That's one of the good things about the good and the bad things about today, where we have so much information out there. There's a lot of good information, but unfortunately, there's also a lot of bad information. And the thing is anybody with a social media account can publish information now. And when you're trying to decipher who to listen to, like you gotta like, what's this person's background? Like who are they? What's their experience? And are they in similar alignment of what it is you're trying to achieve? Like if, for example, like for someone in their 40s, you obviously want a coach who's probably in their 40s or older who can kind of relate to what it is you're trying to achieve, not following some 20-something-year-old who single, no kids, like has youth on their side and recovery on their side. It's a different ball game. And having gone through this, like I literally started working out when I was 12 years old. And I started competing when I was 17. So gone through that whole spectrum, like I can see how the body changes as you get older. right? Like it was one thing in my teens, and then another thing in my 20s, and then in my 30s, and now in my 40s. And I'm sure as I get in my 50s and 60s, I mean, I'll see that evolve even further. But you have to respect the body more the older you get.
Mm. And I hate to say this because like it's like, you know, it just kind of came to me just like as you were saying it, is like there's value in connecting with a coach that you feel as though that you vibe with, right? You know, if I was actually like in my 20s trying to figure this out, would I want to hire a coach? And I'm not saying this because I want 20-year-olds to come to me, because honestly, I don't. I like working with 40s, people in their 40s, but who's going to know more about it? The guy who's been doing it for 20 years successfully and gone through all the trials and the tribulations, or the 20-year-old guy who somehow just immediately got it or is genetically gifted? And like, unless you're that genetically gifted guy who literally had a six-pack at 13, no matter what he did, like if he's 20 and he's coaching you and you're in your 20s, unless you're like him, like he's probably not necessarily going to know what to do when you run into some kind of barrier or hurdle. Like, do you want to be coached by Wayne Gretzky? Because Wayne Gretzky wasn't a great coach. Mm-hmm. But if you listen to, you know, if you watch hockey much or whatever, like the best coaches who were pro hockey players who are now coaches are actually the guys who like ground and fought tooth and nail to make it to the NHL and stay there. Those are the best coaches in sport. And so to me, it's like, I think there's a lot of value in that too. When you're looking at a coach, is like, okay, how genetically gifted is this person, or how gifted is this person? Because are they going to get me if I'm like the former fat kid? You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So I think there's value in that too. But then there's the big value in like, would a 20-year-old really vibe with a 40-year-old coach as far as personality wise goes, right? But
right. No, there's a lot of power in what you said there. I can certainly appreciate that, because sometimes you see people who are really good, and it's because, you know, like from a genetic point of view, it's just they're the right, you know, they're the right person for that chosen sport, whether that happens to be bodybuilding or whatever it happens to be, or hockey. If someone's really genetically suited to that, then they're going to excel. And sometimes people just pick up stuff easier than others, right? Like you sometimes see that, and then the person who had to struggle for it, then they'll learn things at a much deeper level,
right?
You know, especially if they're passionate about it. And I can kind of relate to that with the sport of bodybuilding, because I mean, I was really passionate. I mean, when I was in my early days, like in my teens and 20s, like I wanted to become a pro bodybuilder. I wanted to be a Mr. Olympia in my mind. And I was so naive to think that I can do that naturally, right? Like that's where I was at the time. But I mean, I was constantly studying and learning from the more experienced bodybuilders at the gym, you know, reading books and magazines and getting books from the library at the time, and like just soaking up every bit of information I could, and really, you know, busting my ass with it. But then I realized after so many years, like, didn't really know what genetics was until I seen some other guys that like I met through competition. And I remember one year, this is a true story now. One of our local bodybuilders, Frank McGraw. Do you know Frank McGraw or heard of him? He's a IFBB pro bodybuilder.
I don't think so.
He's around the same age as I am. He's from Newfoundland as well. We trained at the same gym for a while. When I first met Frank, like we both started training the same time, everything else, we're about the same age. Then I realized what genetics was, because he was like huge and like just out of this world. I remember when he did his very first competition, it was the 2000 Newfoundland Provincial Championships. They had a guest poser come in that year. It was Joe Spinello. And Frank was bigger than the guest poser. And this was his very first novice competition. And he just blew everybody out of the water, even blew the guest poser out of the water. Like it was a shit for the guest poser. And I was like, okay, that's what genetics is. Because like we're the same age, been training the same time. Like here I am down here and he's up here. Like, you know, there's something totally different here, right? 10x better physique. It can't be that he did 10x the work, right?
There's a spread. Like there's just a spread on the genetic charts. Like some people are just X-Men and superheroes, and some of us are not. Like my best friend in high school, and he went down a poor path. So, but like he was built like how I'm built in my 40s, lifting my damn near whole entire life at my most recent photo shoot at 180 pounds when we were in grade 10 with a 6-pack and traps on him that looked like he was on gear. You know what I mean? And if that guy had got into bodybuilding, like he probably wouldn't have been Mr. Olympia because of like his height per se, but like, yeah, there's just like, there's separation in genetics and you either have it or you don't, but that doesn't mean that they matter, if that makes sense, in my opinion. Because he went down the path of like being a drug addict and going to jail and all that other stuff. And here we are now in our 40s. And like, if we were to bump by each other in the streets, I'm twice the size as he is because he abused his life and I dedicated. So I like to put that out there too, just because like a lot of people are like, well, if my genetics aren't great, like how good can I be? And it's like, it doesn't matter because like you can't control that. What you can control is like what you put into it. But there's absolutely a spread. Yeah. Like there's absolutely just like superhumans out amongst us, and we just have to accept if we are or not one of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be that outlier. And the reason I really wanted to bring that up is because you can't look at someone who's an outlier and say, well, what is it that you're doing? Or like, you must have some secret formula, because maybe they're doing the same crap as everybody else. You know, they're still doing the same exercise, the same type of eating, but it's just their body responds so much better, you know, because they're just at that level. And, you know, I even remember listening to some interviews with Dorian Yates and stuff. And he's like, we're all doing the same damn exercises, you know, like everyone's like, what's the secret? You know, it's really not there's some magic secret. It's just all these little things that compound over time and being consistently good with all those little things. And, you know, sometimes when you do see those genetic outliers, right, I mean, you're thinking that they might have something up their sleeve or whatever. And more often than not, they don't. It's just they're at a different level. Their body responds better.
Right? Yeah. And there's also people out there that I would say are like genetic outliers who literally wasted it by overdoing it, overtraining, doing too much gear, overdoing cardio, and like, you know, like they just like blew it and they just relied on their genetics to have a decently respectful physique. You know what I mean? Like there's people who definitely blow their genetics for sure. And then there's the grinders who didn't have great genetics that just kind of figured it out over the trial and error. I think it's unfortunate in this day and age, though. Something that drives me nuts in social media, it's like, unless you're a genetic outlier, anything you have to say holds no weight or value. Do you know what I mean? It's like, well, you're not a 220-pound bodybuilder, so why would I listen to you?
Yes.
Well, because I started out at 135 pounds skinny fat. You know, or I started out at 185 pounds as a fat kid, speaking up for myself, for example, went to 135 pounds skinny fat to 185 pounds ripped over all those years. If you looked at the baseline starting point to where I've taken my genetics, it's actually quite admirable and respectful, but it doesn't matter in this day and age where people are just like, well, unless you're the 220-pound bodybuilder, why would I listen to him? And to me, I don't get it, because it's like, are you ever going to look like that guy? Like, why are you listening to that guy where everything's come easy to him? And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Boggles my mind a bit, right?
I can appreciate that. I know where you're coming from. It's a pet peeve of mine as well.
And I think something that's big on social media too is like, if you're listening to social media, understand the effect that the algorithm has on the way people have to deliver their information. You know what I mean? Can you just watch it with a little bit of like critical thinking and be like, okay, what are they trying to say here? Right.
The more controversial, or the more that somebody stirs the pot, the more that's going to rank, because, you know, you'll have, let's just say we're going to talk about nutrition, for example. And so I'm a hardcore keto, or I'm hardcore carnivore, and this is the only way. And of course, everybody who agrees with keto or carnivore is going to say, yeah, absolutely. They're going to thumbs up it and comment, yes, this is right. And then, of course, all the vegans are going to say, oh, this is terrible. They're going to thumbs down, and bitch and complain in the comments. And then you're going to get this keto carnivore vegan carnivore debates going on in the comments. And of course, the social media algorithm just eats that up. And that's what gets shown on the top of the feed when you go searching for something, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And that's one of the things I wanted to discuss here, like with the whole sustainability, like these extreme approaches. I mean, I'm not saying that there's no time and place for them, but realistically, can you see yourself going the rest of your life without eating another carbohydrate or going the rest of your life without eating a piece of meat, from one extreme to the other, right? Like, no, it's not sustainable as a lifestyle. Right?
No. Yeah. And I think like any level of extremity as it deems to an approach, unless you're getting photo shoot ready or you're getting ready for a bodybuilding show or something like that. But even then, like my most recent photo shoot, I was doing, 5 days of cardio and lifting 4 days per week. And my cardio was 30 minutes until it got up to 40 minutes times 5 in the last 2 weeks of my prep or something like that. You know what I mean? Was still only lifting 4 days per week and eating a considerable amount of food. I think like what I try to do with my clients and what I preached is like, I want you to do the thing that gives you success the easiest. And I literally want that to be like the highest effect with the minimal dose. I want you on the most amount of food with the least amount of exercise, with the least amount of activity without getting into unhealthy activity levels. Do you know what I mean? I want you to eat as much as possible, train as little as possible, move as little as possible in order to get you to your goals. And also, we don't need to change your diet until your diet stops working. And the last thing we're probably going to change is your diet, because maybe we can get your step count from 8,000 to 10,000. Mm-hmm. And this drastic, it's like, again, the least for the most is really the way I like to look at things, right?
Absolutely. And one of the ways I like to phrase that is I want people to diet on as high of a calorie intake as possible. Like that's one of the things I always tell my coaching students, because a lot of people most people who come to me for help, I'm not their first choice. They've tried it on their own and failed, right? They've tried going on some crazy diet, whether it's intermittent fasting or keto or carnivore or vegan or just Jenny Craig or Weight Watchers or starving themselves or whatever it happens to be. But they tried it. It didn't work. Maybe they got some initial results, but then like plateaued. I can't get this weight off. I'm just kind of stuck. Then they come looking for help. And one of the common things I hear people say is like, oh, I've been eating one meal a day, right? Or I've been trying to keep my calories under 1,000 a day. Or like your body literally shuts down. And then your strength and energy shuts down. Your mental cognition shuts down. Like you cannot train eating like one meal a day. Like your body's just not going to function optimally. So one of the things we like to do from a sustainable point of view is like the first phase of my program, for example, we call it the metabolic reboot. And it's just, let's fill in all those gaps. Like, let's actually start to nourish your body on the cellular level so that you're feeling good, be able to train hard, train consistently, eat more, burn more, like try and literally build that metabolism, like increase your G flux so that you're burning more calories, eating more calories, and not trying to starve and suppress your body, which is a common trend. I'm sure you've probably seen this, like people doing extreme prolonged fasting or zero carbs, one meal a day. Insert extreme diet of choice, right?
I had a call with a guy because I still do interviews with clients before I'm willing to get on a consultation call to actually, tell them everything the training's about. Sure. Yeah. I do it's like an audition call or, I call it like a strategy call, but it's a matter to find out, like, are we a good fit? Because if we're not a good fit and I'm not going to make you successful, like I'm not going to take your money and I'm not going to have you come on as a coach and as a client. And I've actually had people refer other to me that I've sent away because I've had that call and been like, I don't think it's a good fit or I don't think I can help you. But anyways, just a guy today, I was like, are you willing to change what you're doing to be successful? And it's like, well, no, I'm not willing to stop intermittent fasting. I won't do it. And it's like, okay, buddy, well, no harm, but like, there's no sense in us moving onward from here because I don't teach intermittent fasting. And if you want to keep doing intermittent fasting, then give her, and there's no hard feelings, but at least, I'm a guy who wouldn't have just taking your money, even though, you know, I didn't think I could make it successful, or tried to figure out intermittent fasting when it's not my approach because I don't believe in it. Sorry, I don't believe in that, and we're just not a good fit. So yeah, I see that lots. And one thing that most of my clients say quite often, the most common thing I hear from my clients when it comes to food is like, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to eat that much, or I can't believe I'm eating this much and losing weight. It's like, yeah, you're thriving. Your metabolism's healthy. Your ghrelin hormones, your leptin hormones are all regulated. You're getting the vitamins and the minerals that your body needs to thrive. Mm-hmm. Lo and behold, all of a sudden, you can induce change easily, as opposed to you're sending the signal to your body that it's like literally in survival mode because there's low calories, low vitamins, low minerals, high stress, like yada, yada, yada. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
This kind of goes counterintuitive to the calories in, calories out equation. Like you hear that a lot thrown around in the fitness world. Like, oh, it's just calories. And there is some merit to that. Like I'm not trying to say that there is no time and place for calorie counting or that it doesn't matter. But not all calories are created equal. And one thing is we have to realize like the body's not like a combustion engine where it burns X amount of fuel based on the size of the engine. Like it's varying all the time. So like literally if you eat more, you burn more. You know, if you eat less, you burn less. Like your metabolism has that G flux, it's energy fluctuation where it adjusts according to how much is coming in or how much is going out. Mm-hmm. And of course you got to look at the thermic effect of food. Like if you had 2,000 calories of lean protein, complex carbs, veggies, and healthy fats versus 2,000 calories of, you know, pizza and ice cream, like this is, yes, 2,000 calories, but it's totally different effect on the body.
Absolutely agree. I think calories in versus calories out is absolutely, it's you can't deny the law of thermodynamics.
Right.
It's calories in versus calories out. Mm. But the calories out thing is got a lot of layers to it. I use a refeed meal weekly in my with my clients to hit them with a high caloric intake day, to signal a high caloric intake day for metabolic health. We make sure that the vitamins and the minerals that they need are present. We do a fairly high frequency diet with them as far as like in how often they eat throughout the day and what we're using and all those things. And all of those things affect how many calories you burn, right? How many calories you consume is how many calories you consume, but how many calories you burn has got layers to it. It's not just as simple as I'm 200 pounds. My fitness pal says I'm 200 pounds. My fitness pal says if I eat 1,500 calories a day, I'll lose 2 pounds a day for the next 12 weeks and I'll be good.
Right.
That's not how it works.
Absolutely not. No, it's totally different. I'll give you a prime example. I mean, like one of the things that I've been doing a lot lately, I've gotten more serious into cycling. Like I do road cycling, gravel cycling, but mostly road. And this past weekend, we did a big bike ride. It's an annual ride we do. And over the course of it was Father's Day weekend, so Saturday and Sunday, it was a 323 kilometer bike ride. So we did the Irish Loop of Newfoundland. So it was approximately 6 hours riding time each day for that ride. And during that, like my bike computer, right, tracked it and estimated that I was burning over 4,000 calories on that ride. So like we talk about calories in, calories out. You can't say, well, my fitness pal says based on my age, height, and weight, you know, I'm burning, let's just say 2,500 calories a day. No, I just burned an extra 4,000 in that ride alone, right? So obviously on those days when I'm extra active, that's when I'll eat extra food. You know, you got to fuel the machine, but then on the days that I'm not active, that's when I'll scale it back to more, you know, normal numbers, right? I mean, like you have to adjust it according to the individual. I mean, one that I like to use for my coaching students is on the days you burn more, eat more. That works well for some people. Others like to have the flexibility of the weekends. You know, like I like to be really strict during the week, and then, you know, Friday night or Saturday night, you know, I want to enjoy myself, go out for a nice family dinner at a restaurant or go to the movies and have popcorn and snacks or whatever and have that built in there. And you got to find a way to make it work. And one thing we got to look at too is it's calorie intake over the long term, not over the day or over the week or whatever. It's like when I always tell my coaching students, especially when they, talk about, oh, I've been following XYZ diet, I've been following keto, or I've been following intermittent fasting, and I haven't lost weight. Well, I did at the start, but now I haven't. It's calorie intake over the long term. So like if you average the year in a calorie surplus, you're going to be heavier at the end of the year than you were at the beginning, right? Regardless of how many diets you did in between, right? So it's long-term average. And I think that's something that gets tossed out because a lot of people are only focusing on like day-to-day averages, calories in, calories out over the course of the day. But we really need to broaden that perspective and look at it from a much bigger picture, right? Your average calorie intake over the long term, over the weeks, months, and ultimately even over the year, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of in line with my nutritional approaches. Is like if you were to look at the average caloric intake that I give to my clients with the luxury lifestyle allowance, where they're cycling with that high caloric day on weekends, because of who I help, like that's when they want to have that typically conventionally with their friends and their family and stuff on weekends. And so they have social life, fitness life, success in life, business, all those kinds of things. That's when I kind of do it. But if you were to look at the overall caloric intake throughout the course of a week, it averages out to a higher daily intake, but we hit one day higher because I believe in the metabolic health of doing so, but then also the like mental aspect of giving yourself that reward day. I don't think willpower is an endless resource, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like you say, you're looking at it as an average over the course of the week. Like you can eat 2,000 calories more on a Saturday if at the end of the day you were still in a 3,500 calorie deficit and lost a pound in the course of the week.
And the mental side of things is huge too. Like that was a strategy I've utilized in the past. Maybe have a few days really low calorie and then have a refeed meal, like whether it's once a week or twice a week, however you plan it out to factor it in. But it breaks up the monotony of having to be on this nonstop diet.
Right.
Like I remember when I was competing in bodybuilding, like last going off, one of the strategies that worked really well for me is I would diet really strict. And then on Wednesday night and Saturday night, those were my 2 days. I would allow myself to have a free choice meal, if you will, on Wednesday night and Saturday night. And the reason I did it at the nighttime, because a lot of people think, well, why are you eating a cheat meal in the night? Like, wouldn't you eat it early in the day and burn it off? Because I wanted to keep my eating consistent throughout the day. Because if I eat a cheat meal for breakfast, say, or, early in the day, then it's so easy to say, oh, screw it, the day is blown. I'm just going to keep cheating all day long.
Yeah.
Whereas I ate consistently to get the protein and the veggies and all the good stuff in throughout the day, it regulates the appetite and then less room to binge later in the evening. But then I only had that one, that one free choice meal, if you will, right? That one cheat. So I found it helped me keep on track. But mentally, I only had to diet for 3 days at a time. Then I had a little break, 3 days break. Like anybody can diet for 3 days, right? Like it broke it up mentally for me. And I mean, I could keep doing that for a long term. And the last several bodybuilding shows that I did where I really nailed my conditioning and I was kind of coming into my own with it, that was a strategy I used. And not only was it good from a conditioning point of view, but it was good from a mental point of view because I diet for 3 days.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I've done the 2 high calorie days myself throughout the course of a week. Or like medium days, low days, and high days. I just hated the low days. Like there was a point where I was just like, oh, my 10-year-old son gets to eat more than me today. Life is great. So I like to kind of just have that one day because I think for my clients anyways, and even for myself, it allows to have a little bit more sustainability to last those 6 days. But it's not to say one way is right or the other. It's just the way that I like to do things and the way that I found kind of to be best. But you hit the nail on the head. It's exactly what I tell my clients too, is like your cheat meal comes in the evening.
Yeah.
Right. Because you've already had 3 or 4 meals by the time you get to that cheat meal. How much damage are you going to do at 6 o'clock at night with the cheat meal versus, I don't know, you're going to wake up and not eat anything until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then you're ravenous and then you go literally crush an entire pizza to your dome.
Right.
There's definitely like a strategy behind keeping it done with some moderation. Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
put some guardrails around that cheat meal so you don't go off the road with it, right?
Yeah.
I actually learned that strategy from Jay Cutler. He was a guest poser at one of our local bodybuilding shows, and he did a seminar for us. And he was telling us this back in, it was in 2006. He did a seminar when he just became Mr. Olympia, right? We booked him as a guest poser before he was Mr. Olympia, and then he won the Olympia and came in and guest posed as Mr. Olympia. So that was a pretty cool treat. But he did a seminar, and that was one of the strategies, as he explained his cheat meal strategy, and it was always in the evenings for that very reason, because he could keep his nutrition intake consistent throughout the day versus having that cheat meal early and then blowing the day. And like, let's just say you go out for a breakfast brunch and you're eating all kinds of crap, and then it's so easy. Well, I blew it. Friggin', I go for burgers and ice cream now and then we're gonna have pizza and why not a bag of chips and like it's so easy.
The guardrails come off, man. The sooner the guardrails come off, the sooner they're out of the way. You absolutely hit the nail on the head. Lee, I gotta fly because I just gotta attend to some stuff. I feel like you and I could literally chat, man, for hours. It was awesome having you on the show. I'd love to have you on again. Maybe one day connect on your podcast as well or whatever, and we can kind of pick up where we left off, because I think you and I really are of the same belief on a lot of things. I got a lot of value listening to, your side of things as well. And obviously I assume the listeners and the viewers did as well. So just wondering where it's the best way that they can kind of, get more of, your knowledge and advice from these decades of lifting and being and doing it all from sustainable in your 40s to extreme bodybuilding. Your wealth of information, man. So how can people find more of that information from you?
The easiest way is just to search for my name, search for Lee Hayward. I mean, I've got my own podcast, Lee Hayward's Total Fitness Bodybuilding Podcast. I'm on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, the major platforms there. But literally just do a search for Lee Hayward, and you can even go to leehayward.com. That's my personal website. If anybody wants to reach out to me, this is the easiest way to do so.
Awesome. Well, appreciate your time so much, man. Like I say, love to connect again to the viewers and the listeners. You know the drill by now. You've been listening to the podcast long enough. We're going to make sure that Lee's links are in the description here for you so that you can check them out. I appreciate you for listening. If you got value from the episode, please share it to your socials so other people can hear it as well. And as always, have the best day ever.